I am so happy to have our friend, New York City play therapist, Dr. Jill Leibowitz back. We met years ago because we happened to share a publisher, and our publisher makes their authors feel like family. And so Dr. Jill and Chris and I have met in real life. Here she is. She's been on here before, I think, a couple of times already. She certainly understands the background of what many people here are dealing with. There she is. Hi, Jill.
Hi.
But we were talking about what we can do for our next topic, and we thought uh, especially you as a therapist, Jill, you see a lot of conflict between divorcing parents and co-parenting situations that unfortunately seems to be increasing more recently, that I personally think is a reflection of our society, unfortunately, again. So I thought we could talk about some of the mistakes that parents make that actually add to the conflict, but they think they're doing the right thing. So thank you so much, Jill, for coming back to talk about this evergreen, important topic. And before we even get into it, can you say a little bit about who you are and your background, just in case people haven't seen you here before?
Sure. I am Jill Leibowitz. I'm a clinical psychologist and I have a private practice in New York City. I do play therapy with children and I also do talk therapy with adolescents, young adults, adults. I do parenting work. I do some work with parents and infants. We call it dyadic work, where we work with them together to foster secure attachments. And I'm also the author of two children's books, which just happen to be right here next to me. And I
Yeah.
can't see myself, so I don't know if this is in the screen, but
Oh, yeah.
okay.
I can see you. Yep.
I can't get rid of something that's on here, and I'm afraid I'm going to drop the call if I try too
Yeah.
hard.
No,
So,
you're fine. You're fine.
okay. So my books are The Untold Story of Itsy Bitsy's Long Emotional Day, and the sequel is Mama Stressed, The Untold Story of Itsy Bitsy and Mama. And they kind of model how to help co-regulate a child who has become dysregulated and had a tantrum, but also how the parent can regulate themselves and have repair when inevitably things sometimes don't go the way that we want them to go with our kids. So.
And when do they ever go the way that we want them to go? I mean, that is hard. So one thing I thought was very, very interesting that you and I, Joe, were talking about privately the other day is how kids will say something to one parent and something else to the other parent. And then let's say me as the parent, like I feel like what my kid says is true and what they told me is true. As a therapist, can you tell us how kids actually say different things on different days and why?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of reasons why kids will say different things. Um, for one, I think that oftentimes they're telling the truth, but their truth might change on one day or the other, or the way the way this happens to any of us, the way we're feeling um, at one moment might be different than how we feel at a different moment. And so what we have access to and what's true in one moment might be different than in another. So I think that sometimes a child feels a certain way and they bring that to a parent, and then they might feel differently on a different day when they're with the other parent. And so they're both true. I think
Mhm.
also sometimes kids think that not let me rephrase that. I think sometimes kids feel like this is how I am with this parent.
Mhm.
And I bring this part of me. Maybe I bring the more emotional part of me to this parent. And this other parent, I bring the more brave, um, outgoing part of me. And and I need both as a child. I need to be able to express all these parts of myself and I need them to be validated. And I think often this happens when parents are living together and the child kind of balances that in the home with the parents. But what then happens when the parents are divorced or getting divorced and they're between homes is the child then brings a certain part of themselves more often to one parent and a different part of themselves to the other parent. And so each parent then has an experience that the other parent isn't seeing what they see and doesn't know that this is sort of the truth for the child, when in fact I think often like both sides are a truth for the child. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think the thing that we see a lot with the people we work with is they see the child coming back from the other parent's house and complaining that they don't like what's happening at the other parent's house. And so our people are like, I want to tell the other parent that the kid is not comfortable with them. Why is this a good idea or a bad idea?
It's often problematic if a if so parents are apart, they're raising their kids in sort of two separate households, and if one parent is then telling the other parent what to do in their home and how to be with their child in their home, it almost always is going to cause that other parent to feel angry and defensive. And to me, this is one of the biggest ways to, we talked about the title of this, like to inflame the conflict.
Mm-hmm.
That it's, I mean, in a sense, then the other parent is going to experience you as micromanaging their
Mm-hmm.
time with the child. It's going to be with you based on what the child tells you, which is based on something of their real experience, but it doesn't mean it captures the whole story of what's going on and what happens in real, like as you were saying before, right? Like when does everything go exactly as we want it with our kids, right? Sometimes real life gets in the way, and maybe a parent did have to do some work on the weekend when the child was there with that parent, and maybe the child did feel frustrated that they wanted more time to do something fun with the parent, but the parent had to do some work. And that's for the child and that parent to kind of work out together. I think it becomes really problematic when the other parent then comes in and says, like, hey, you shouldn't be doing work on the weekend when you have our child.
Mm-hmm. Like, this is your time. And when I'm with the child, I spend all the time with the child, and you're basically frittering away time. And so therefore the child should just be with me if you're not going to spend time with them.
Right, right. And that is, I don't know ever when that kind of a interaction from one parent to the other ends in something where the other parent says, oh, hey, you know what? That's a great point. Sure,
You're right.
sure, you can have the child during this time that is my time. Or sure, I'm going to think differently about how I spend my time with the child, right? And in fact, what I think ends up happening is the the parental conflict then creates tension, and it builds anger and resentment. And if anything, then there can be like a doubling down from the other parent in some way.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's how then your child ends up getting caught in the middle of it all, right? Now it's really like it's this battle between the parents, but now the child is the one who's going and spending time with each of you and getting caught in however you're both behaving and responding because of that argument.
So speaking of that, that makes me think of how certain families say, well, things have to be consistent in both of our homes. Even though we hate each other, we should have the same dietary things, bedtime, study habits. Do you see that? And how does that usually go?
Yeah, this is one of the biggest topics that comes up when I'm working with high conflict divorced families. And in in theory, right, the more stability a child has, the better. Of course, the more regulated their system is, the better. And
Mm-hmm.
I try to kind of hold that with parents so that in terms of like a child's physiological regulation, um, sleep, like the amount of sleep a child gets and when like kind of the bedtime and the waking time should be relatively consistent. How you go about bedtime, where the child sleeps at each different home, what the bedtime routine is, I don't think has to be the same.
Mm-hmm.
I think kids learn just like they learn what the rules are at school versus the rules are at home, and they know like there's more that they can often get away with at home than they can get away with at school, or they
Mm-hmm.
may know I can do this with the babysitter but I can't do this with my parents. I think they pretty quickly learn what the rules are at each home and what they can do, and they adjust so long as it's consistent within each home. So like at one home there should be consistency in that home, and in the second home there should be consistency there, and then it's okay for there to be some inconsistency
Mm-hmm.
in the minute details between the two homes. But regulation wise, like I do think the amount of sleep a child gets should be pretty consistent generally. Obviously, there are special occasions and holidays where kids get out of whack. But generally speaking, I think like that piece. Dietary, I think it can get tricky. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, you want to have an overall dietary healthy setup for your child, but different parents sometimes have, maybe one parent's a vegetarian and the other one's not. And so I think there it can get really tricky. And by and large, I just think you want to avoid as much conflict as possible. And sometimes that means just having your established rules in your home and letting the other parent have their rules in theirs.
Yeah. So what you've described, I learned the term from this parenting coach named Mike Barsamian. It sounds like something he referred to as code switching. He said it's basically like kids learning that there's a different culture in each of the homes, just like when they go to school, let's say middle school or high school, where they're switching classes and they see each teacher is different and has their own rules and personality and style and expectations. And I just have to sort of adapt. I don't expect that it's going to be the same in every class. So just like with the parents, it's going to be different. But the other thing I was thinking about regarding consistency, what we see all the time creating lots of problems is screen time, where often our client is like, I put limits, and when the kid goes to my ex's house, they're on the screens all weekend and our kid is suffering and they're an addict, addicted to video games. And like, what can I do? Because we're not on the same page. Like, how do you deal with those kinds of situations, especially with devices and technology now that are really impacting a child's brain?
I know this one is really hard and really tricky.
Mm-hmm.
And I, I'm for kids, not young kids, not, well, all kids, all humans, not having too much screen time, but certainly young kids. And and so it's tricky, and often I feel like it's very tricky in my role as a therapist working with the child when both parents, one parent will say like, well, Jill, like, where do you weigh in on this? But it's a loaded question because it becomes like something that's then going to go to court and become part of a legal battle.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, I I ideally the parents are mostly on the same page, and they're, I think, like in terms of what apps, in a way, like what apps does the child have access to? Are you letting them have free reign? Are they allowed to have social media at a young age? I mean, that's a little tricky, and I think in some way has to get really out between the parents. And
Mm-hmm.
then in terms of the amount of time that the child is on, I mean, again, like you just cannot control
Mm-hmm.
what is happening in the other home. You just can't.
Yeah.
And so I think that this is one of those. So not everything can be a battle.
Mm-hmm.
And there may be things that you feel strongly about and that you want to put up a fight about, but I think part of the question then for a parent in this situation at any moment is, where will this battle get me? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I think you really can't control what's happening in the other parent's house. And so the more you make it a battle, the more the kid knows the battle's going on, the more tension that is then kind of continuing to exist with you and your ex. I think it just continues to inflame the situation. So what you can do is control what's happening in your home.
Mm-hmm.
You can talk openly to your child about your philosophy about technology and screen time, and you can have limits in your own home, which your child will push against, especially if the other parent is more lenient.
Mm-hmm.
And you then, and I know this is so hard, I'm saying this as if like this is so easy, it's not, but you then have to like tolerate your kid pushing against you and tolerate maybe even feeling sometimes like the bad guy,
Mm-hmm.
and just hold steady that you believe strongly in this and you think this is what's right for your child, and that they are internalizing that as well as whatever is happening in the other home.
Yeah. So this made me think of another issue that one of our clients, that we've had many clients deal with this, where the one parent is looping the kids into a text chain to have the kids almost push for the decision that that other parent wants, where they'll be like, oh, like your mom won't let us do this thing. And why don't you ask? Like, we're all talking together in this text chain. And then our client is like, why, this is between the two of us. What do you
Yeah.
think of those situations? Or how can someone handle when their ex is looping the kids in and the kids start battling as if they have decision-making power as much as the other parent?
So my first response to that is, don't loop the kids in to
Yeah.
these parental decisions, right? So if you are someone who's doing that or thinking about doing it, right, like stop and pause and think, wait a minute, what am I creating here? Now you're asking though for the parent on the other side of that, right?
Right.
So
Mm-hmm.
I I think I think I I know that every answer I'm giving, I'm like, I know all this sounds like a little overly simplified because I
Yeah.
know these situations are so complex.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that if you have been looped into a conversation with your kids on it, you can say, I'm going to reply to your parent separately. This is between the grown-ups, and do that. And I wouldn't go anything more. I wouldn't say they should not be looping you in.
Yeah.
I just,
Okay.
I'm
I feel
really,
better because that's what I was telling our client to do. I said,
and then
don't answer and just don't even say stop doing it, because they're going to just keep doing it.
right, just reply to the parent and separate from the kids. And they may continue to keep looping, this may continue and the parent may then loop the kids back in. And I would just continue to then communicate only with the parent and not engaging, I guess, in the looped in conversation, but
Yeah.
also not making a thing
Mm-hmm.
that there's a looped in conversation, right? Because then you have joined in even.
Right, right, right. So
Yeah.
not answering the kids who are saying, come on, let's do what the other parent wants, just not even responding to them.
Yeah. Say your other parent and I have to talk about this. This
Right.
is between us. Just kind of you keep sort of setting that limit, and you might have to keep doing it. It may be like a broken record where you're just constantly like on repeat saying the same thing, but you stand by it and you maintain that limit.
Yeah, yeah. So another thing that's coming up now is summer camps. Big issue. What are you seeing? And what are you seeing regarding summer camps and legal decision making, et cetera?
Ugh, this one is really tricky, and this comes up all the time. And
Mm-hmm.
this is also where, as the child therapist, the parents try to pull me in, and I will, in these situations, I will not give an opinion about what I think is best for the child because it's inevitably way too loaded.
Mm-hmm.
And the communications are so mixed and confusing anyway that it's hard to really grasp what is the situation for the child. But what I would say to keep in mind is that this kind of goes with something I was saying before. So a child might have ambivalent feelings about going to sleepaway camp.
Mm-hmm.
They may want to, I guess I'm thinking we're talking about sleepaway camp.
Yeah,
To go or not to go.
Yeah, like
So,
going away to camp.
yes. And so, some kids are just like, I want to go. My friends are all going. I'm ready. I want to do it. But some kids feel ambivalent and they both want to go and they also feel nervous about going. And that's totally normal and understandable. And so then what happens, what I see a lot is that the parent who they bring more of their worries to and bring more of those kind of big emotions, they go to that parent and that becomes the place where they talk about all their fears of going away to sleepaway camp.
Mm-hmm.
The other parent, which is the parent that they kind of bring their braver self to, who they feel pushed and challenged by, but in a good way, that parent is who they bring all the excitement to. And then the two parents tend to like fuel those separate sides. So the parent that they bring their worries to kind of really engages with all the things you're worried about, and I understand, and they validate all that. And the parent who they bring their braver side to focuses on all the exciting and all the bravery and doesn't pay much attention then to the fears.
Right.
And they both exist and they're both real. And so I think one thing is that the parents on both sides have to make space for the other experience with the child, perhaps to help the child integrate them better, so that when your child is telling you all the reasons they don't want to go to camp and why they're afraid or they're not ready yet or they can't be away from you, and you validate all that, but then afterwards you wonder, are there any things about camp that make you feel excited? Are there any parts of it that you feel like you want to experience? And open up space so that they know that it's okay to bring that part to you. And equally, if your child is telling you all the reasons why they want to go to camp and why they're excited about it, and also I think you can let them know that you're talking to the other parent. I think it's really important that they know that. So you could say, I'm excited for you when I think of you going. And I've also heard you've told the other parent about all these things you're worried about. So why don't you tell me some of that too? Let's think about all of it together. And maybe that helps everyone feel like a more educated decision is being made about ultimately the decision of whether to go or not.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, the thing I'm thinking of too is that many of our clients feel like I'm the parent that my kid trusts. So I'm the one who knows best. Do you think it's true? I mean, do you think it's like there's one protective parent most of the time who really gets the kid and the other parent's a bit of an outcast? Or is that more of a stereotype? Or maybe it's just the community that we work with, where it is like extremely high conflict and many of our clients' exes do have addictions and personality issues.
Yeah. I can't weigh in on like a single answer to that question.
Yeah.
I think sometimes there is a parent that the child feels safer and more comfortable with. And sometimes that's accurate. I think sometimes that is the role that the parents have established and taken on. And in that regard, what I recommend is often actually to the parent who's being a little bit pushed aside to, rather than to say something like, well, my kid doesn't act sad with me. My kid is always happy and we're silly and we're having a great time, is to say, do you ever check in with your child about other feelings they might have. And again, I really like for kids to know that in a more positive co-parenting way, that the parents are sharing information. So I think that parent can say, hey, I heard from the other parent that you were feeling really sad
Mm-hmm.
yesterday. You were saying XYZ, and you were with me the day before, and I didn't know any of that was going on. Do you think you could tell me about some of that? Because I think as parents, we then play into those roles, like they get established, I think, when the kids are pretty young.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes I think that can be bridged with the parents talking to one another, and both parents being able, again, to convey, like, I hear this from your other parents, so I know that there's more to how you're feeling than just this. What you're sharing with me is real, and I take that seriously, and I wonder if there's more that you might want to share with me. I kind of put that on both sides, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. Unfortunately, I think for a lot in this community, the other parent is not very reasonable and logical and willing to work together. It's more of that battle stuff. Let's talk a little bit about power being burdensome for children. How, like, what you see where kids they feel like they have a lot of power, and it's actually a problem.
Yeah, I mean, it's this funny thing where on the one hand, kids think that they want the power, and they rebel, when the parents are giving uh setting limits and, not letting them be on devices or things like that. But actually, that kind of power is really overwhelming for a child, and it really burdens them with too much responsibility
Mm-hmm.
for their own well-being, as well as, I think, sometimes for the well-being of one or both of their parents. Again, it's this tricky thing of balancing. Oh, are we still good?
Yep, yep, yep. Mm-hmm.
Balancing, you know, hearing what the child is saying, getting the child's input, knowing where they might stand on a decision that's being made. But ultimately, especially when they're, younger kids, they're not, like older teenagers, when they're younger kids, ultimately, it's still the parents who make the decisions.
Mm-hmm.
And they need to see that the parents are the ones making the decisions. Um, and I realize that as we're talking, and I know the population that you are working with, that sometimes the problem is it's really tricky because the parents cannot come together and agree on a decision.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think it's important that the child's feelings about things and what they want be a part of the decision making process. But, a kid might say, I want to go to bed 2 hours later every night, and I want 3 more hours of screen time a day. And I also want to eat cake for dinner every night. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you still have to you can take in what the child is saying. You can say, like, I know you want that, and I know it's disappointing that you can't have it, but we need to take care of you and make sure you're healthy and safe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Jill, I know we're getting a little low on time. How can people find you? I know other times we talk, you're like, I can't take any more clients.
Yeah, I'm really not taking any patients right now. But I do have a website, and you can contact me through my website. It's realtalkseveryday.com. Also, in the past, when we've met and done these interviews, I've not really been doing much on social media, but I'm finally getting more active on that. So also, you can follow me at Real Talks Every Day on Instagram. I also have a Facebook page, Real Talks Every Day. And through those, you can always message me. And also, like, through my website and things like that, I'm, posting tidbits of information and blog posts and things that hopefully are useful for people.
Yeah, thank you so much again, Jill. And it's great knowing that you're out there and that you do understand the dynamics of these high conflict families, because a lot of therapists don't. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
All right. I'm sure we're going to have another one of these conversations.
And I'm looking forward to your book coming out
Oh,
very, very soon.
yes. Thank you. Yes. So we're going to see each other in person for that, I'm sure.
Yes, yes.
All right. Take care and stay warm.
Thanks. You too.
Sure.
Bye, Lisa.
Bye.